Is your business struggling to stand out from the crowd online? At Webamax, we specialize in turning clicks into customers. From SEO and PPC to social media management and stunning web design, we've got you covered. Boost your online presence and drive real results. Ready to take your business to the next level? Visit Webamax.com. That's WEBIMAX.com for a free digital analysis. Rule the web with Webamax.com.
Hello and welcome to Islanders Anxiety from Lighthouse Hockey and the Fans First Sports Network. My name is Dan Saracini. Joining me on this very hot Tuesday afternoon is my friend Michael Leboff. And Mike, it's going to be basically hot as hell on the East Coast this week, but we have a new Stanley Cup champion. We have a newly re-signed Islander. We have a draft coming up at the end of this week. We have free agency starting less than a week from today. So it's a big time for hockey, despite the weather outside being much more suited for the beach. Where are you at right now following the Florida Panthers? I don't know what the word would be. Stunning or stirring or perhaps harder than it should have been Stanley Cup final victory over the Edmonton Oilers that we watched last night.
Yes, the biggest game in hockey history. The 60 minutes of hockey that is going to grow the game exponentially.
Yes.
Across these sea to shining sea.
Right.
I thought it was funny. You heard that comment made all over the place. This is the biggest game in NHL history, but as soon as the Canadian team lost, it was it went away pretty quickly. As soon as McDavid was, sullenly skating off, it wasn't the biggest game in NHL history anymore. It was just, we got to pivot.
Right.
I thought it was entertaining, and it was a good reminder to a lot of people, and I'm why would they? It's not what should be top of mind for anybody out there who covers the sport. But if you have Islander people on your Twitter timeline, you saw them all celebrating for Kyle Okposo, who left the New York Islanders 8 years ago now. It's been so, like, the fact that Kyle is still so beloved by the Islanders, the team that drafted him all these years later. Like he became kind of a story in the series as the guy who's, like, never won with the most games and all that. And it was honestly emotional. I almost cried when I saw him get the cup from Bobrovsky.
Yeah.
But it was
the
just
third person to get the cup.
Yeah.
On that whole Panthers team, the guy who'd been there the least has so much respect that he was the third person to get it.
and Matt Tkachuk was talking about him after. And the reason I bring it up is because it just is one of those things where we'd say it all the time. We will love you forever if you're a New York Islander, as long as you don't do what one particular, or maybe a couple, there's certainly Kirk Muller types and other guys who've done us wrong. But if you give us the respect that we give you, we will love you forever, and we will root for you, even though you are wearing a Florida Panthers jersey and playing against a team that, like, we have no reason to hate. It wasn't
right.
It wasn't like he was playing the Penguins or the Rangers or the Maple Leafs in the Stanley Cup final. He was playing the Oilers, and there's no reason for us to have too much disdain there. Huge congratulations to Kyle Okposo. It was really nice to see Islander fans celebrating it. It's crazy how many people seemed to be honest, like, actively rooting for the Panthers just because of him. And it was a reminder that, like, this fan base isn't just about throwing snakes at people who deserve to have snakes thrown at them. It's also about people, treating guys like Okposo the way that they deserve. So, it was for that reason alone, it was a fun night to watch.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope that some people, and we're going to get all into the Canadian media side of this whole thing, I'm sure, because, we have to, because that's how we're wired. But I hope they do take note of the fact that, yeah, former Islander was being vocally cheered by Islanders fans, and he left as a free agent. And he did it in a way that was very different than one of his teammates. And we still love him. And another former Islander, very instrumental in building this team, Roberto Luongo, another guy who I think we still have a great fondness for, although again, that was a lifetime ago, and a man who has really, despite playing for the Islanders and the Canucks, might be him and Ole Jokinen, I think, might be the first real, like, sort of, this guy bleeds Panthers red. You have like guys like Bill Lindsay and maybe Scott Mellenby from the old guard, but it's a small list. And Roberto Luongo is definitely on it. It was great to see him lift the cup as well. Although, to be blunt, I did miss him actually lifting the cup on TV, because as soon as ESPN threw to Mark Messier, I turned the broadcast off because I've had enough Mark Messier. Thank you very much. I didn't listen to him during the intermissions. I didn't watch any of the 52 documentaries about the Rangers Stanley Cup that they put out in the last couple of months. I didn't listen to his pregame stuff. I don't want to hear what Mark Messier has to say about anything. And so throwing it to him means that was the end of my evening. But I am glad to see the pictures today. We're going to get into this a little bit more. We're going to talk about, again, the Islanders maybe making a small but I think impactful re-signing earlier this week. There was a trade literally an hour before the Game 7 started, which is a pretty ballsy move when you're trying to calm the waters there, Jeff. But reminder that we are on Patreon at patreon.com/IslandersAnxiety. Plans get you ad-free episodes, bonus podcasts, written posts, and a whole lot more. This is going to be, barring any kind of weirdness during the summer, our penultimate episode for this season. We only just have one more next Tuesday after, the day after free agency starts. But over at the Patreon, we're going to have stuff going all summer long, mailbags, country club atmosphere, non-hockey podcasts, and God knows what else. We're just going to throw it out there. So sign up today, patreon.com/IslandersAnxiety. Okay, let's finish up on the Cup final. It was an exciting one. The Panthers raced out to a 3-0 lead and then decided to let the Oilers win 3 games in a row as well. Canada was primed for its first Stanley Cup ever. The building was packed to the gills with Oilers fans who probably paid a lot of money to some Panther season ticket holders who sold those tickets to them. Well, you don't know. But at the end of the day, the Panthers hung on for a 2-1 win. Sam Reinhart scored 57 goals this season with the game winner and the Cup winner. The third period, though, so it was funny because the first period I was like, the Panthers are playing kind of scared. Their breakouts are kind of discombobulated. I don't know about this. They took the lead and then the Oilers scored right away. And I was like, oh boy. But over the course of time, the Panthers took the game over. And I would say second period was actually probably mostly them. But then the third period was mostly Oilers. And if it wasn't for the heroics of Sergei Bobrovsky, we'll get back to him in a second, this might have been a tie game and maybe even gone to overtime. Watching the Panthers basically give up on offense and let the Oilers tee off on them and let Bobrovsky just basically gobble up whatever pucks came towards him, frankly, gave me some Islanders flashbacks, and not in a good way. This is exactly what we've watched a little too often this season. And sometimes it works. Like last night, Bobrovsky was great. Panthers just kept icing it. I think they might have had like 3 or 4 shots total in that period. And the Oilers did all they could. But at the end, there was a tie-up in the corner, and the clock ticked down, and the Panthers were Stanley Cup champions. Did you feel the same way that I did watching that third period? Like, holy shit, this is exactly what we have suffered through all season long. Except most of the time, our team came away on the losing end of it, or the other team would tie the game, and then the Islanders would lose in overtime. But I couldn't have been the only person watching this being like, oh man, I've seen this script play out before.
Yeah, I think you're right. As an Islander podcast, we have to bring it back to the Islanders, of course, and the text. I got a couple funny texts about just how watching that. Our friend Eric Needell was saying that Scott Mayfield would probably have 4 icings in his own under his own name in this period,
and a penalty too.
Yes, and a couple other takeaways too from that game. One, like it always, for some reason, every time the Stanley Cup is handed out, I'm just I remind myself, like, there's just no way the Islanders are going to win a Stanley Cup while I'm alive. Because I can't wrap my mind around the feeling of watching like those first 15 minutes after they win with Islanders. Like, it was watching Kyle Okposo do it was already almost surreal in its own way. And yeah, we had talked about how he's like the only Islander in this post Tavares, like only real guy with like real Islander, connections, not like the Chris Gibsons that set Carter Verhaeghe types,
Yeah.
but like an Islander. Like Kyle Okposo is an Islander. There's a lot of people who wear Kyle Okposo jerseys to games to this day. And so that was even surreal. So just as a reminder of just how far it feels, and I'm not even talking from like a roster construction point of view or anything like that. Just like the whole idea of winning a cup. It just feels so outlandish in my own head that the New York, like to seeing a blue or white New York Islander jersey, like skating around with a cup over its head. Come on. It just feels so weird.
I said to my wife at one point during that period, I'm like, I would be in a mental hospital right now if this was my team watching this. Like I felt nervous for the Panthers, and I frankly don't even care. Like, I don't know why, but it was just so much. And I thought the same thing you did. Like, if this was my team and they were playing like this, I would lose it. And yeah, I mean, I think it is a pipe dream at this point. And again, I don't think we're not trying to be like Debbie Downer or anything, but like, it's just the concept of getting to this point is
it's the concept
far.
More than like the actual like concrete, like what are the Islanders' chances of winning the cup? It's like the actual concept of winning the Stanley Cup and watching the New York Islanders do it. That's what's a pipe dream. The other takeaway, and I don't know if you've noticed this too throughout the playoffs, but obviously the New York Islanders have a head coach, Patrick Waugh, who, but it's still crazy to say, that he's won Stanley Cups and he's an all-time great and one of the clutch performers of all time in the sport. So when you're watching these broadcasts, his name gets dropped a lot. You know, the last Canadian team to win the Stanley Cup was Patrick Waugh's Montreal Canadiens. Or the last time this happened was 2001 when Patrick Waugh won the Stanley Cup with the Colorado Avalanche, right? And every time they say his name, it takes like 5 seconds for me to like click back, like, oh my God, they're talking about the New York Islanders head coach, Patrick Waugh. When they say that, like, it's so funny that it still takes some time for it to register that he's, when people are talking about him, which, like I said, happens in passing all the time in these broadcasts. Like you hear Wayne Gretzky's name, you hear Gordie Howe's name in these
Mark Messier is heard a lot.
You hear Mark Messier's name all the time. And one name that pops up maybe just like behind those guys is Waugh. And in what you're so conditioned to it just being like a little footnote in broadcast that we've watched over the years, from OLN broadcast to ESPN. And I have some words about the ESPN coverage because good God. But now, like, every time they say it, I have to train myself to be like, oh, they're talking about the Islanders head coach, Patrick Waugh. I love that guy. You know, he actually means a lot to me now. Whereas a year ago when they were talking about him on these broadcasts, he was just Patrick Waugh, the guy who was like so far off the Islanders radar that I can't even, he brings out no emotion from me. So that is another takeaway here. Besides the ones we've already talked about with Okposo and the icings and the Panthers turning into the Islanders for a couple minutes there.
Right. Yeah. And I did say this also on Twitter. The other people I was happy for besides Kyle Okposo and Roberto Luongo were Panthers fans. Like, I don't know any personally, but I have a great deal of sympathy for them. They've had to endure a lot of arena nonsense, a lot of relocation, sort of wish casting from reporters and writers and fans up north. They have been the butt of attendance jokes. They've been the butt of, all kinds of, sort of overrun expansion jokes. And to see them win, it took them 30 years to do it, but to see them win made me feel happy for them. Like, I think that's really cool. And, if there's one lesson to take away for the Islanders or for any team really, is that you can build to this. There's no like sort of finite time frame when you can or cannot win a Stanley Cup. I mean, we saw the Blues win their first Stanley Cup in 50 something years just a couple of years ago. And then, we saw the Caps win their first Stanley Cup a couple of, a year before that. And obviously Vegas, it only took 5 years, but it might take a while, but you can get there. If your team is built the right way and executes the game plan and sticks with it, it can be done. And so all of those jabs and all of those goofball idiots, from God knows where in Canada saying, "Oh, you got to move this team to Quebec, get them out of there. Nobody needs 2 Florida teams." Blah blah blah. Even the ribbing they took from people in their own state for not supporting the Lightning, who obviously have had a much better and much more decorated history than they have, was probably a lot. But I felt for them, and I felt happy for them that they won. Now, the other side of that coin, our Canadian fans who have been waiting for a team in their homeland to win a Stanley Cup for a long, long time now. And I am going to say this. Number one, about the Oilers. Number one, LOL. Number two, Connor McDavid winning the Conn Smythe Trophy is kind of funny, but also he set the record for points, or whatever was assists in the playoffs. So you got to give it up for him, I guess, although he did not have a shot on goal in the final 2 games. So it's a little bit weird, but, I guess we can give it to him. But the other thing was that had the Oilers won and completed this historic comeback and come back from 3 games down to win the Stanley Cup for the first time since 1942, it would have rendered every Canadian-based hockey podcast absolutely unlistenable from here on into the foreseeable future. There's no way any of these podcasts, whether it's 32 Thoughts, Spittin' Chicklets, any of the other ones that people listen to all the time, would have ever covered anything ever again, aside from this one series. And so in a way, we should all be thankful that the Oilers lost, because now we can move on to other topics that aren't, wow, can you believe the Oilers came back from 3 games and none down to beat the Panthers? So thank God they lost. But
it was another class. It's like another classic example of how disconnected like the people in the hockey media are from the actual like boots on the ground fans too.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Oilers are quickly becoming Canada's team. They're taking Canada for a ride here. The whole country is behind them. Like, yeah, except for everybody in Vancouver, Calgary. People in Montreal don't even consider themselves Canadians first. Like they're I don't know if they even give a shit. And people in Toronto are just trying to figure out like how does this impact the Leafs? So it has absolute. The Senators are making trades. Like I love that they think, because this is how they view the sport in this weird egalitarian lens, where all of Canada gets behind a team like this because they are rooting for the Canadian team to win, because
I was going to say they root for people, not teams.
Right. So yes, we root for people, not teams. Steve Levy said that on the broadcast last night when I don't even know who was hoisting the cup, but he goes, we don't root for people, teams or sweaters or logos. Well, I guess you do, Mess. You were rooting for the Oilers, and it's like, yeah, and so do you, Steve, and so does Linda Cohn, and so does whoever's producing all these documentaries for ESPN this year. Like, we know who you guys are rooting for. It's what's made these broadcasts so insufferable. But it's like they have no grasp of what it's like for these fans on the ground, to the point where when somebody's like, "Oh fuck no, I don't want the Oilers to win. I hate the Oilers because I'm a Flames fan or a Canucks fan," they're like, "Whoa, well, you're the minority. You must be the minority. You're the loud minority in this situation." Because I know, my friends that I speak to at the gym, they're all rooting for the Oilers here, because and that's like the rest of the country. Like, no, dude, this is sports. Like we hate basically every other team besides a select few. It doesn't matter if they play next door to us or if they play in Florida or wherever. It's part of it is hating other teams, and they just can't wrap their mind around it. Right. So congratulations to those haters out there that really wanted to see the Oilers lose, and like you would probably, and me, would not be listening to like the first hour and a half of every hockey podcast that you could think of for the next 6 months had McDavid pulled it off. So it's man.
I'll name you one other hater, and it is Matthew Tkachuk, who said I couldn't let Edmonton win. So even he still has connections to Calgary after playing all those years there, and I thought that was pretty awesome too. And he also told a great story about wanting to win for Kyle Okposo, because Okposo had been talking to his son and was telling his son, when I was 8, like the age of his son, he was in the driveway on rollerblades pretending to be in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final, and here he is now playing, and his son gets to watch his dad play in that game. So again, it was a very heartfelt thing, and I gotta tell you, Kyle played great. He didn't figure out on the score sheet, but that fourth line came out, the Listerainen and the other Lomberg, not the one who plays for the Rangers, but they played really well and set the tone and were very physical and helped the Panthers win that cup despite not getting on a score sheet. So it was great. Again, the ESPN-ness of it maybe left a little bit to be desired. I hope Sean McDonough can finally catch up on his sleep, because he sounded the entire time like he was looking for a nap. So I'm glad he can finally go take a good long rest.
The ESPN missed Sasha Barkov hoisting the cup. You might have turned it off by that point, but that was great. The audio kept cutting out.
Yes.
So this is the biggest game in NHL history, Frege, and it's on ABC, it's on national television. Too bad the broadcast is going to make every hockey fan completely bonkers.
Yeah. It was nobody was satisfied at all. Seriously.
But once again, it blows my mind that this isn't something that has become a story in the way. Like if that was the Super Bowl, if that was if that was a random NFL game, that showed that had their broadcast like that, it would be in the freaking I guess the New York Times is a bad example now because they own the Athletic, but like it would be a story that the coverage was terrible, like fans missed the hoisting of the Lombardi trophy, all that, whatever.
If this was an MLB game on Amazon, it would be a whole thing. Does Amazon deserve to play baseball? Can they get it right? Was this a smart thing? And you're making people sign up for Amazon to watch this, and now you can't even get it right? What are you doing? But
we're 3 years into this deal, and nobody and outside of fans, because if you like go, ESPN tweeted out the video of Barkov getting the trophy, and the quote tweets and all that are great, but the only people who bring it up are fans, because I don't know if it, well, obviously like the ESPN writers aren't going to call out ESPN. I guess the other writers don't want to piss off another rights holder. NHL people aren't going to do it, so it's very strange that nobody. What's his name? The guy who's like the big media, Richard Deitch. Like, why? I don't know where he works now, but I don't know why Richard Deitch isn't doing a story on this kind of thing, because it's the type of story that would have absolutely been a big deal if it was another sport.
Right. Well, he likes to interview the big shots who make the decisions and make this product so terrible, as opposed to interviewing people that actually watch the product and are like, why is this so terrible? So it doesn't surprise me at all that he hasn't. I think he still writes for the Athletic, but you're right. I mean, he should, and he's based in Canada too, so he probably doesn't even see any of this because he's probably watching Sportsnet. So the whole thing, So, but again, we're stuck here and we have to suffer through this. And I mean, we would be lying if we didn't say we watched these games.
OLN, right? Like the OLN, at least OLN had like a product that was built for hockey fans, called by hockey broadcasters. This has been tough.
Very tough, very tough. But it's over now, and well, I guess not, because we got to watch the draft coming up at the end of the week, and then we'll have to find I guess the trade center or
all right, mess. Can you go walk out on the stage and do a recreation about like what it was like when you got drafted by the Rangers before you won 1994. Oh, I was drafted by the Oilers. Doesn't matter. Go out there and what would it be like if you were drafted by the Rangers? Can you do a walk across the stage, maybe hoist the cup up there? It was 30 years ago. The draft coverage is going to be terrible.
It is. And they're going to find some way to get Messier out there with the cup. As So but
it's like, whose day with the cup? Poor Josh Mahura had to give up his day with the cup so we could have it here for Mess to walk across the stage with it at the Sphere.
Right.
To celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Rangers winning the cup.
Please. Oh, Jesus Christ. Anyway, we got, hopefully, not for nothing, this won't happen, but ESPN could win back a lot of goodwill if next year they celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Devils winning their first Stanley Cup. Obviously I'm not a Devils fan, I don't care, but like, at least if you did it that way, like if they spent the entire season hauling out Ken Danico to hold up a Stanley Cup, you'd be like, all right, you know what? I guess it's a bit. We're going to do a 30th anniversary thing every year or whatever, but I'm going to go ahead and guess that they're not going to do that. So I think Ken Danico is safe. I think his calendar is probably not going to get too filled up. He's going to stick with just the Devils broadcast. Okay, but let's go from a former Islanders Kyle to a current Islanders Kyle, because that was the other big news of the week, was the Islanders re-signing young Kyle MacLean to a 3-year contract. We all kind of assumed that it would be a 90, just shy of $1 million, 950K, whatever. But somehow Lou Lamoriello worked his black magic again, and the contract is only $775,000 a year AAV, average annual value. It's a great deal. Okposo. MacLean came up from Bridgeport late in the season or halfway through the season. played his role very well throughout the regular season and into the playoffs, where he was one of the few consistent Islanders doing what he needed to do. I believe he's 25, and this was great. I'm not going to do cartwheels down the street because they signed a depth player to an economical contract. But I mean, this is the kind of deal that is a nice little kind of foundational thing. It is 3 years, maybe, a year more than most people would think. But at that price, who cares? And hopefully MacLean has some more years ahead of him and only can get better from here. What do you think of the signing when you first heard about it? I don't think any of us really, we knew he was like an RFA, but I don't think anybody had like, oh yeah, the Islanders are just going to announce Kyle MacLean signing in the middle of the summer, the middle of Stanley Cup final that way. So it kind of came out of nowhere. But what'd you make of this when you heard about it?
I mean, I thought it was a slam dunk. Even with at that price, I wouldn't care if it was 8 years, right? Like, because it's $775,000, which means you can put it in the minors forever and just bury
Right.
it.
Yeah.
So like, it's not if Kyle MacLean was a flash in the pan, which is funny to say about someone who was like just a really good checking line center. Like, but if he was, then that's it. Like,
Right.
he goes back down to the minors, or you could put him on waivers. Someone would claim him, etc. So there's really no downside in my mind to this contract at all. So I thought it was a slam dunk, and it was great that it happened. Nobody noticed, obviously, aside from Islander fans, and about 15 minutes later, like 4 trades happened. So there was all this hubbub, and I don't mean to make this into a stretch, but perhaps it was. It's the kind of trade that would be universally signing, I should say, not trade. It's the kind of signing that would be universally lauded by any most teams, I guess, teams that get any sort of attention. If the Maple Leafs signed like Connor Dewar to this contract, there'd be 6 stories by each with 2 different bylines at The Athletic about it, and some Josh Cloak would be sitting at his dinner table,
Right.
and Connor Dewar would be like, "I don't know who you are. I'm calling the cops." Like, and he'd just be like, "Well, before you do that, let me just ask you first question about what was it like playing in your? Did you wear a Maple Leafs jersey when you were playing as an 8-year-old at this
Right.
tournament that I know you played at?"
Right. Can you give me your grandmother's phone number? Can I call her and ask her what it was like when you were growing up, and how proud she is that you're playing for the Leafs? No, definitely, for sure. I mean, depth players for the Islanders in particular aren't going to get that kind of look. But
yeah, great signing.
Yeah,
Jolted my mood for sure when I saw it, and what's funny about MacLean, just generally, is that there was like every reason to not like him as a player, I guess.
Right.
In like today's day and age, here's a guy who like had no real standout seasons in like the minors or a junior,
undrafted,
son of a NHLer, son of obviously an Islanders assistant coach and a Lou Lamoriello favorite, all that. So it had nepotism, kind of just, it reeked of nepotism. And even after his first couple games, like, I was like, this guy is not good. Like, what a disaster this is going to be.
Right.
Bring back Otto Koivula, because this guy can't be the fill-in center right now. And then the All-Star break happened, so he played a couple games. The All-Star break happened, came back, and yeah, he really just turned into a fan favorite very quickly. So it's not like he won the kind of genetic lottery or whatever, and nobody probably had an easier path to learning the sport and all that stuff than he did, but he overcame like a lot of kind of that kind of ill will, I guess you would say, to become a player and a likable player. Like, I didn't think he would take this turn where he became a fan favorite. I thought maybe like an Otto Koivula role. So kudos to Kyle MacLean. It's actually a really good story.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the value of, or the power of, doing your job. Like, he came in, and especially in a season like this where so many Islanders seem to not have been doing their jobs, because again, this used to be a team that was able to hold leads and kill penalties and do things that they just decided not to do this year. And MacLean came in and did what he needed to do. And also, it's an interesting time because 2/3 of the fourth line that we've come to know very well over the years are UFAs. And I mean, it's possible that they're both back, but it's also possible that they move on from both of those guys. And here comes the next wave of that. And he can kind of play that role for sure and play alongside Casey Cizikas, or maybe even replace, let Casey move up in the lineup and let him take over the kind of fourth line role. So it's been an interesting ride for him. He did become a bit of a fan favorite. I mean, there were people that were like, call this guy up, get him up there. And you look at his AHL numbers and be like, I don't know, this guy doesn't really do much, but this is exactly the kind of game that he plays. Responsible and, does the job and does it well. Now, here's the thing. Me, I always have to look on both sides of the coin. What we don't want is what we were saying, what happened to another guy who we were saying all these same things about last year, which is Hudson Fashion, who also earned himself a contract extension and also seemed like a really, versatile and reliable depth piece, only to come into this year and really never find his groove. And, at the breakout day, it was like, I didn't really like being a pinch hitter. And it's like, well, dude, that's kind of what we need you to be. And I don't know why this is all of a sudden being a shocking thing, but I don't think it's over for Fashion. I think he's got 1 year left. So, I mean, they could still make something out of him. I don't, these are obviously two completely different guys. So I'm not going to say that MacLean is going to be Fashion 2.0 or something like that. Or again, that, Fashion is a lost cause in this case. But, that's always the thing. But again, like you said before, at $775K, who cares? Like, you can just dump him in the minors or throw him in and, put him on waivers, and it's really no big deal if it really, really goes south. But I highly doubt that. One other potential negative is this might mean that John MacLean is back behind the bench after a incredibly unsuccessful season for both the penalty kill and the power play, whichever one he coaches didn't work out really all that well. And so, that might be a bit of kind of a wrinkle too, if you were hoping to get a whole bunch of new assistant coaches in there, but we'll have to see. But as far as depth pieces go, I think the Islanders did well here, and we'll look for more from young Mr. Kyle MacLean. Okay. Couple of deals though went down in the Metro Division this year. One in the Atlantic Division, probably I'm seeing a little bit of, but let's talk about these Metro Division deals first. One of them, I think the first one that went down was Jacob Markstrom finally getting traded to the New Jersey Devils for a first-round pick and defenseman Kevin Ball, who's about 9 feet tall. I don't know if he's any good. He's just tall. That's all I know about Kevin Ball right there. But Jacob Markstrom looks like he's going to be the Devils goalie of the present. I don't know if he's got 1 year left or 2 years left, and then he's going to have to sign an extension. This makes the Devils a better team. Does it make them a playoff team? Does it make them better than the Islanders? I don't know, but I'm glad that this trade finally went down. Who's going to play goal for the Flames? I have absolutely no idea, and I don't really care, but I'm sure they'll find somebody. What did you think of this when it went down? It's funny because it kind of slipped under the radar a little bit because the other trade went down, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But like, this was one that was rumored going back to pretty much all of last season. And didn't happen until it finally did. And everybody's like, yeah, all right, I guess so. And I thought the return was okay. I mean, there was always going to be a first rounder, I guess. But I don't know. I mean, Markstrom is going to be better than whatever the Devils were trying out this year. But is he enough to really make a huge difference here when, if somebody gets hurt, that team just kind of falls apart too. So we'll see. But what do you make of Markstrom coming over to Newark next year?
Yeah, I mean, it's not good for us, I guess, and that he definitely improves their goaltending situation, sure. Which, but at the same time, I just feel like even though they were bad last year, the Devils, like, it's just everyone's going to be right back on the bandwagon, right. And it's and it'll be annoying again. And, sure. And the only, I'm kind of just sick of them right now. Like they're entering Sabres kind of territory for me where it's not like I hate them. And of course, like the enemy of my enemy situation, but, I'm just kind of sick of hearing about them because we heard usually when a team has a season like they did where they fall into irrelevancy, like the Devils did. And I know that they had high expectations, but like once you got to the point where, yeah, the Devils aren't going to make the playoffs, they're not that interesting right now. Like they are still talked about ad nauseum, and I just didn't want to hear about them anymore. So this trade, I feel like got filled a hole that they needed to fill, but it's like, yeah, dude, like, you got a goalie, join the club, and we'll see with this team because they're starting to get on my nerves and a little bit here because of how they were covered in a season where they had sure a lot of injuries, but like they had they got the every excuse in the book treatment last season instead of just being like, yeah, they sucked, so.
Right.
Well, yeah.
It's funny how injuries for different, like, when the Leafs had an injury, it was like, wow, they're battling. Look what they're battling through.
Yes.
Look at it's unbelievable what they're going through here, Jeff. But at the same time, if any other team loses a guy in like the first week of the season, it's like, wow, this season hasn't gone well for them. Like every time Adam Pelech is out for an extended period of time, it's never mentioned ever.
Right.
So it's a little bit rough. But yeah, I'm with you. I am annoyed by them, and it's funny that you talk about teams that get all the attention despite having not done anything, and they're gonna, they're still gonna get that treatment, and people are gonna talk. This is the year they finally make the playoffs. We'll just jump ahead real quick to last night's trade, which was the Linus Ullmark to Ottawa. Again, hours before Game 7, the Senators sent Joonas Korpisalo, some depth forward, and I think a first rounder to Boston for Ullmark. Again, he's a UFA at the end of this year. So either he signs an extension with Ottawa or he walks, or my assumption is that they will stink again and they'll trade him at the deadline to somebody who, may or may not use him in the playoffs, or may he sign somewhere else. Again, the Senators are 100% going to get the benefit of every doubt, and will be on every team's every writer's like, oh, this is the year for them. And then, by November, their season is over. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully Ullmark's career doesn't fall into the toilet, but wow, what a ride for him, huh? Vezina, he goes from Buffalo, where he gets shelled every night, and it's like, man, maybe this guy would be pretty good if they played a lick of defense. Goes to Boston, wins a Vezina trophy, beating Ilya Sorokin by literally a couple of percentage points, ends up a backup to Jeremy Swayman, who just kind of emerges from his cocoon as the veteran goalie the Bruins were looking for this whole time. And now he's right back to the suck, and he's right back to the Senators, where he's going to get shelled every single night. And, probably goes back to his Buffalo numbers. So we'll see what happens. But it was hilarious. You and I were talking in our group chat about how pissed Gary Bettman must have been that the Senators and Bruins announced this trade literally an hour before warm-ups in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final, when apparently he doesn't like that kind of thing. So we'll have to see what happens. But yeah, I'm still not buying Sens. Sorry, Sens fans, not that you're listening to this, but I don't think Ullmark makes that much of a difference. And we'll have to see. But Steve Stais is trying to calm the waters out there. So are the waters calm? Do you think they've calmed now that
the waters
Linus
calm?
Ullmark? Yeah.
Yeah, I think first of all, I love that they announced it literally during warm-ups of the Stanley Cup final Game 7, because all playoff long we hear, yeah, this probably, we probably won't hear anything for a day or two, because the league doesn't, teams know the league doesn't want, the trades to be announced on game days during the playoffs. Right. And then all playoff long, news breaks on game days, and nobody ever says, and media people keep repeating that phrase over and over and over again, as if it's not happening all the time. So that was great. I really appreciated that. Who knows with the Senators, man? It's I know a lot of Islander fans think that the Senators and them Islanders make sense as trade partners, and we'll get into stuff that kind of stuff in a little bit. But I'm rooting for them, just because in that division, I would love for them to take one particular playoff spot away. So good luck to Linus Ullmark and the Senators. It's going to be a very different experience from what he was dealing with in Boston, for sure.
I think so, for sure. And bonus, he gets to play Boston 5-6 times or whatever in the middle of the season. So that'll be a lot of fun. But we did skip over a trade, and this is the funny one that was good for a bunch of laughs. So Pierre-Luc Dubois, a man who is a very talented hockey player, made it to the NHL. He's got the size, he's got the skill, and yet is somehow never, ever happy anywhere where he plays, is now playing for a new team. He got traded to the Washington Capitals in a 1-for-1 trade for goaltender Darcy Kemper, who the Caps signed immediately after he led the Avalanche to the Stanley Cup, and then watched him turn back into, Darcy Kemper again this season. This trade is hilarious. It's interesting. The Caps are trying to squeeze whatever juice they can get out of the Alex Ovechkin era, and I don't blame them. I'm not, no disrespect. I mean, I would be too. Like, you got this guy for a couple more years. You want to try and get the most out of him. I get it. I don't know who they're going to get in goal, but maybe there's a UFA out there that they're into. Kemper apparently already played for the Kings, which I completely forgot about. So he's back to LA. They were looking for a goalie too. And I mean, he can't possibly be any worse than the guys they were using last year. But the Dubois part of this is absolutely uproariously funny, because this is a guy who started in Columbus, didn't like it. Oh, no. Yeah, no, he started in Winnipeg. Wait. No, he started in Columbus. Yeah. Didn't like it there. Wasn't happy playing in Ohio. He's a French Canadian guy. They want him to play in Montreal, or he wants to play in Montreal, but he gets traded to Winnipeg for Patrick Laine, another kind of 1-for-1 deal with a guy who wasn't happy. Obviously doesn't like playing in Winnipeg that much. This isn't the Canada you were looking for. Ends up signing he gets traded to LA. The Kings gave up a lot to get him too. Gabe Vilardi and a bunch of other pieces. They sign him to a huge contract extension, but like a lot of contract extensions, the no trade clause didn't kick in until I guess July 1st this year. So his first year in LA didn't go well at all. What do you have? I don't even think he hit 20 goals. He had probably less than that. And so they had a choice to make. They can either stick with him and hope that he turns it around, or trade him before that protection kicks in. And they chose option B, and they got only Darcy Kemper for him. So this is very funny. I think a lot of people have a good reason to laugh about this. I am assuming that Dubois will not have a fun time playing in Washington and will try and cry his way out of this too. And the Caps will be stuck with him. But by then, Ovechkin will be retired. Brian McClellan, the GM, will be fired. They'll have another coach. Like, it'll be a totally different team, and we'll just have to suck for a while. So I thought this was uproariously funny. Again, came completely out of nowhere. People were like, what are they going to do with Dubois? I guess they're stuck with him. Well, they weren't. It just goes to show you once again, for anybody out there that's like, oh, man, nobody will ever take Anders Lee's contract. Nobody will ever take JG Pajot's contract. Nobody will ever take Scott Mayfield's contract. There are people that will take these contracts. They will take them. They will figure out a way to take these contracts. I'm not saying they need to trade these guys. I'm not trying to get rid of these. I'm just saying, never say that any contract is not tradable, because it 100% is. And this is living proof. That is 100% you can trade any contract in this league. What'd you make of this? The 1-for-1 trade, just the Hall for Larson trade just ruined that. That's going to be the greatest. The trade is 1-for-1 trade of all time. This didn't quite cut it, but it was funny to kind of see that phrase again.
It was, and I think what you said was going to be my point here, which is it just goes to show that everything that everyone says about contracts and no move clauses and whatever, it's worth the paper it's written on in a lot of cases. So
right,
it just blows my mind that this stuff happens, and it also harkens back to before he was traded to Winnipeg and then to Los Angeles. I just remember Islander fans being like, "Ooh, maybe Dubois makes sense for us," and all this stuff. And that's the other thing too. It's like every time a player's name starts to circulate, it's, oh man, like that guy. What if we do this and get that guy in? And you'll see people on Cap, and I do this of course too, but the Cap friendly page, and you're looking at it, you're like, this is just not going to happen. Like, you're not going to have Luc Dubois on the Islanders with the way his career has been going. So, completely out of nowhere. That one, that move didn't. It's funny how these trades these moves have brought out different emotions, right? The Markstrom trade kind of just was annoying more than anything. This Dubois one was funny. And then the Barclay Goodrow situation for the Rangers just made me so mad.
I can't believe I forgot about that.
Yeah, this was another situation where the Rangers we did a whole theme of episodes and with a theme of this entire season with the way the Rangers were going, is that this team just catches the kind of breaks that you really have to go looking for to see. And once you get there and you're in those weeds, you'll never stop thinking about him. Because in my head, I was like, not only did they catch a break with Goodrow by kind of screwing Goodrow over with his no movement clause, his no trade clause, by putting him on waivers to get him to the Sharks, who Mike Greer and Chris Drury are best friends. So it was like a favor. The only team that has favors done for them by opposing GMs, the Rangers. So that happens. That made me mad. They get the contract off the books. That made me mad. And then all these other situations started to happen with Markstrom, Dubois, like it all happened on the same day. So it kind of got buried a little bit. And I know people afterwards when they covered it, were like, yeah, Goodrow is mad, but nobody brought up the fact that these two GMs are really good friends. And like the Rangers just got a huge favor done for them by a team that is technically competing with them. So it was so annoying. It's typical Rangers, but the only upside here is that what it's done is oh man, we got Barclay Goodrow's contract off the books. You know what that means? we could get Patrick Kane.
Yeah.
Like, and all these, my For You page on Twitter is all these like Ranger burner accounts and that are talking about like the Kane scenario and like, oh, we can get him back. He was really good for the Red Wings last year, and they all are missing the point here. And they all have like the picture of him in a Rangers jersey, and it looks like one of those photoshops when like rumor Mitch Marner to the Anaheim Ducks, and like there'll be a Photoshop of Mitch Marner in the jersey, except this really happened. You guys already had this guy. You all got excited to have him, and it didn't work. It did not work at all. And it wasn't because Patrick Kane is a bad player. He had a decent season for Detroit. Don't think he played much defense, but he had a good season for the Red Wings, but he's absolutely redundant for you guys. Once again, like the reason he didn't work for you guys was because what are you going to do? You're going to move one of your really good players off the first power play unit so you can play Patrick Kane in his spot.
Right.
Like this, it's crazy that these fans, you'd think that they would learn their lesson from it, because after the Kane experiment didn't work the first time around, they'd be like, you know what? We probably shouldn't go back to those early 2000 Rangers and just go after every big name out there. That's not, we shouldn't really go after the Patrick Kane types. And then a year later, not only are they going after the Patrick Kane types, they are going after the literal Patrick Kane again. And like, oh, we could sign him. If we sign him to he wants a 3-year deal. I think we could stomach that. Like have Patrick Kane for the last 3 years of his career. Go right ahead. You know what? Yeah. Maybe it bites me in the ass saying this, but please bring Patrick Kane back if you guys do. Which is funny because I think actually, like when you think about his skill set, you're like, oh, that actually is kind of what the Islanders need. They need a guy who can create offense for them on the wing, whatever line you want to put him on, like that skill set, even with his flaws, like the Islanders have enough players who can cover up, who have too much of his weaknesses and not enough of what he brings. But the Rangers are like the exact opposite. Like you guys think you need this guy again? Come on. So I was very happy to see that the first line of thinking after Barclay Goodrow left was, okay, now we take that money and we just give it to Patrick Kane, who's definitely never been a Ranger before. Like, we got to give it a shot.
Well, because here's the thing. Everything you said is 100% spot on, but Patrick Kane remains Patrick Kane. He remains the guy who's won 3 Stanley Cups. He remains a future Hall of Famer. That is the only thing that these people care about. That's all they want is the biggest name. And why would Patrick Kane even want to come back and play for the Rangers? I don't think he had a particularly great experience playing here, so I don't know why they would want that. But yeah, you're right. To fill that one hole, to get out of one jam, just to fill it with another one, makes no sense at all. But yeah, apparently, and we need to also discuss, we can't talk about the Barclay Goodrow thing. I mean, the Kane thing is obviously completely ludicrous, but we can't discuss the Barclay Goodrow thing without the follow-up article from our friend Larry Brooks, who said that this kind of thinking, the ruthlessness of Chris Drury in getting rid of a player of Barclay Goodrow's, kind of, the guy didn't want to get traded, or he had a no trade clause or whatever, and then they just put him on waivers and had a deal with San Jose basically that he get picked up, is the kind of approach that the Rangers need. So this is from the June 19th, and the headline is Chris Drury's ruthless no trade call list on Barclay Goodrow is exactly the exact approach the Rangers need. He said, I'll just read the, I guess we're just going to do an impromptu Ranger Piece Theater right now. So I'm just going to read the first little bit here. After speaking to multiple sources on Wednesday, there is widespread belief that Barclay Goodrow had included the Sharks on his 15-team no-trade list that GM Chris Drury got around by placing number 21 on waivers, where San Jose excised the first claim to take the 2-time Stanley Cup winner. This was ruthless. And this is what championship organizations do. Yeah, I guess that's true. And my first thought was, if any other organization did this, Larry would be hooting and hollering and wanting a NHLPA investigation. But he actually does the exact opposite. He goes into like how the Lightning have done this kind of stuff. Did this with Dan Boyle. They just got rid of him, and he basically ended up getting claimed by Atlanta because he wouldn't get traded to someplace, and how they traded Ryan McDonough. They were basically like, look, if you don't want to get traded to Nashville, we're going to put you on waivers, and we don't know what's going to happen. So they make it happen. But I think it is kind of funny that like this is the thinking that wins championships, even though it's Barclay Goodrow. What real, like, it's not like they put, Artemi Panarin on waivers, and
Yeah,
right? Like,
exactly. Yes.
so
Yeah.
it's kind of funny.
Oh God. Yeah, and it's I think Matthew Strauss was the one who pointed this out to me, and it's a great point, which is it's the type of cold-hearted thing
Hmm.
that people associate with Lou Lamoriello,
Yeah.
even though he's quite the opposite with this player.
Yeah.
And like when these kind of moves are made, and I feel this way about handing out big contracts on July 1st too. Everyone's like, "Oh man, that's such like a Lamoriello move right there, doing that." And like what version of Lou have you guys been watching for the past 6 years here? Like, I don't. He like kept Ross Johnston around for a
Yeah.
while, and then when he waived him, it was a big deal. Even though Ross Johnston has played averages like 11 games a season for the Islanders, he wouldn't even put him on waivers for the first few years. Like he gave this guy a $1 million contract. It wasn't a great, it wasn't a tidy piece of business giving that contract, but it's not like this isn't a Lou Lamoriello move. It was a dick move by a GM because he's a Rangers GM,
Right.
doesn't have that reputation. So yeah, Barclay Goodrow, the Rangers catch another break, and it's perfect way to start the offseason was watching them get that cleanly moved 3 point whatever million off their books, and thinking, wow, man, and everyone thinks like we're gonna have to give up a second round pick to JG Pageau. What league is everybody watching here? Like we can find ways out of things without mortgaging
Right.
draft picks. But
Well, the other option, I guess, for the Rangers is to take that $3 million and tack it on to whatever they're going to give Igor Shesterkin. So that's the other thing.
Oh
too,
yes,
So,
yes.
but then that's another classic Brooksism where before Game 7, he was like, if the Oilers win this with Stuart Skinner in goal, then why are the Rangers even going to give Igor Shesterkin that kind of money? Like, who cares? Let's find another, Stuart Skinner.
I love that.
Like, okay,
Yes,
sure.
please do, please.
Instead, it's Bobrovsky, Mr. $10 million, who has been, that contract has been a punchline for whatever it is, 6 years, 7 years now. And if it wasn't for him, the Panthers wouldn't have that Stanley Cup. Like they just got it. So, but there you go.
So good, because it that between that and Dom at the Athletics tweet about Paul Maurice hiring Paul Maurice and firing Andrew Brunette being an all-timer, it really just goes to show you how people just never shut up. Like they have to weigh in on everything, and if you do that, you're going to be wrong more often than not. So it's really a great lesson in just, hey, guess what? You just don't need to weigh in on John Merrill's AAV with his with his new contract with the Minnesota Wild. It's not, nobody's going to remember that in 20 years when they're looking at you and thinking, oh man, should we put this guy in the Athletic Hall of Fame? Well, his chart did say that John Merrill's contract was a C-, and according to his model. So I think we'll punt on this one. Nobody cares.
My favorite are the ones like when a guy gets a contract and it's like, well, he gets signed for $5.3 million a year, and then Evolving Wild is like, well, we had it as 5.2, so this is kind of an over. Okay, guys, sure, whatever you say.
Okay, they were guys. Get back in that conference room and just renegotiate that contract because. And well, this is the Tulsky situation, right? Like Eric Tulsky, now the GM of the Carolina Hurricanes, and is now one miracle away from sainthood.
Yeah.
So congrats to Eric Tulsky, because we're every little thing that goes right for the Hurricanes, he might lead them in goals, assists, and points. He's going to win the Rocket Richard Trophy as a GM this year. Let me tell you, there's a difference between the way we had this discussion, I think, on a mailbag episode about like the core hatred teams, like obviously Rangers at the top, and then you got the Leafs right there with them, and then the Penguins kind of right behind the Leafs in that order, and those back two will change depending on the temperature and who's playing, who's the captain of which team, all that stuff. And we also talked about how the Hurricanes have kind of made their way up, moved their way up in the rankings. But I've realized it's a different kind of thing. Like I am rooting for the Hurricanes to fail, whereas like with the Rangers and the Penguins and the Leafs, it's kind of like you're resigned to the fact that they're going to be around the playoffs and all this stuff, and more often than not. Maybe the Penguins are heading in the other direction now, but forever it was knowing the Penguins and Rangers would be there. The Leafs now, knowing that they'll be there. And with the Hurricanes, I'm now rooting for them just for this thing to just completely blow up in their face, because I need Eric Tulsky to be an abject failure as a GM because of the way that this guy's treated. And I don't know him, and everyone says he's such a nice guy, so I kind of feel,
Right.
you feel like a dick saying
Yeah.
it. But these people have made me hate him
Yeah.
so much because of the way that they treat everything that the Hurricanes have done forever. Even though they're the team that waived Gus Forsling and they traded Eetu Luostarinen, who just lifted the Stanley Cup. I just, it's so,
Yeah.
I hate myself sometimes for thinking this way, but these people are so annoying
Yeah.
that, let me tell you, every signing that the Hurricanes make and trade that they make over this offseason is just going to be, this crazy Eric Tulsky situation. And I just, it's going to piss me off so much. I hope that they start terribly. I hope that it all goes to pear-shaped for them. And
no, I feel 100% the same way. I was actually talking to my wife last night during the game. I was like, I forget what kind of commercial came on, but I'm like, I really admire people like yourself, and we're going to talk to Ethan Sears from the New York Post in a couple of minutes here, but like people who can get into other sports and follow other sports as closely as you do, with not just soccer, but you're into cricket, you're into the darts, these kind of off the beaten path sports, and people that are huge Mets fans, and also huge Islanders fans, or huge Giants or Jets fans, or also huge Islanders fans, because I can barely care about the NHL anymore. I care about the Islanders, but it's people like this. It's these guys that are constantly talking on Twitter and constantly wrong and constantly sharing their opinions when no one asked, and then not ever being like, well, I was wrong about this. That just makes me hate this sport so much. I can't take it. And then, you are happy for people that you are connected to, in this case, Kyle Okposo, Roberto Luongo. Again, I have a lot of happiness for Panthers fans, but the immediateness of the stupidity of the tweets that came afterwards is just oh man, I can't take this anymore. I can't deal with this. And Tulsky's a perfect example. I just can't. I'm sure he's a terrific guy. He used to write for Broad Street Hockey, for God's sakes. He knows people that I know that are friends of mine, and he's written stuff for Lighthouse Hockey. And I'm sure he's an absolutely terrific guy, and, is a Philly guy. And under normal circumstances, I'm sure I would be rooting for him, but can't do it. Can't do it.
These are not normal circumstances. No. This is very abnormal and hard to explain.
Yeah. The well has been very much poisoned, but we'll see how it goes. But yeah, hopefully they fail, because that would open up a spot for the Islanders. Much like I hope Jacob Markstrom falls flat on his face as a New Jersey Devil. But we'll have to see. How it goes. Okay, we are going to take a break, and when we come back, we will be joined by, like I said, Ethan Sears of the New York Post to talk about the upcoming draft, maybe a little free agency. Who knows what else? We'll see what happens, but he'll be joining us, and we'll see. Oh, here he is. Okay, we'll be back on the other side, so meet us there. Thanks. And now, a word from our sponsors. First is VintageIceHockey.com, where you can get t-shirts, hoodies, jerseys, mugs, and more, featuring over 100 classic hockey logos. Vintage Ice Hockey also carries our Al Arbor and the Island merch, and our portion of the sales always go directly to the Center for Dementia Research. Use the code ANXIETY20 to save 20% off an order of 2 items. That is VintageIceHockey.com. Try wines from the Pinot Project. They offer a Rosé, a Pinot Grigio, and a Pinot Noir that was named a 2022 Top 100 Best Buy by Wine Enthusiast magazine. All are delicious, priced at less than $15 a bottle, and available at local wine shops and at UBS Arena. Learn more at thepinotproject.com. Please drink responsibly. We are joined right now by Ethan Sears of the New York Post. Ethan, it's great to have you on. We've been meaning to get you on for some time. Before we get to the Islanders, though, this is why this is a perfect time to get you on, is because, like Mike, you were also at the T20 Cricket World Cup tournament happening at Eisenhower Park recently on Long Island. What was that experience like for you? Were you a knowledgeable cricket person before going in, or did you have to kind of give yourself a crash course before it was this tournament watched by a few billion people across the earth kicked off in your own backyard?
First of all, Dan, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And to answer your question, I probably had to give myself a bit of a crash course. I'm one of those people who will kind of watch anything that's going on, especially if it's a big international tournament. So I've found myself tuned to the Willow Network, which
Yes.
is like the big
Yes.
cricket channel before, but like I've never like sat down and watched like from front to back, like really understood what was going on. It's been more like like this,
Right.
Afghanistan is playing Bangladesh in cricket. That's kind of cool. Let me, I can watch that for 20
Right.
minutes. So, I had to kind of give myself like a little bit of a refresher course. And then during the game, I mean, what I thought was like the coolest part about it was that, all of the, India and Pakistan fans sitting near me were kind of checking in throughout the game. Is, do you understand why this is important? Do you understand what's going on? What do do you think that, India is going to have a chance to win this game? Do you think the math is working for them? And they were kind of explaining to me as it went, which was just unbelievably nice. I've never had any kind of experience like that, at a sporting event, and B, incredibly helpful. Because they knew what they were talking about.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Good.
Yeah, it was as I've said to Dan, we've now done two 2 full hour episodes on cricket for our patrons at our Patreon page. I've said to Dan on numerous occasions now that I'm really trying to make the Islanders cricket's team. I met a couple of Australian broadcasters throughout the week when I was at the press box, just trying to get them to latch onto the Islanders. Was successful with one of them. Still working on the other one. So, of course, shout out to our friends, Adam and Peter across the pond. It is quickly becoming an addiction for me. And I shouldn't say quickly, it's been years now, but like my love for cricket grows exponentially. I kept using the word intoxicating to describe like the atmosphere and the culture. And like during last night's game 7, I was flipping to the Afghanistan Bangladesh game because there was an amazing situation. So it was a shortened game. The rain came, and they have this thing called the DLS method in short form cricket, where they use this. I can't believe the chart slingers out there and hockey aren't obsessed with cricket, because they use an equation to basically set a target score if a game is getting shortened. It's called the DLS method, and what was going on was basically if the rain kept shortening the match, like Afghanistan was going to get through. So there's a great video that you can find on Twitter of the Afghanistan coach signaling to his wicket keeper to go down, and he's like, waving his hand down like you would to someone in soccer, like, hey, go down, fake an injury. And the bowler's about to bowl, and the Afghanistan player just crumbles to the ground, holding his hamstring, trying to waste time. It's just it was like I've said, it's a lawsuit on grass, right? Like you're just trying to cheat your way to the result you want, follow the rules better or whatever, exploit the rules. And it was one of the best one of the best versions of that. And it was all going on while game 7 was happening. So I was just cracking up on watching that on Willow, and then flipping over and hearing, watching the hockey. And I was like, I don't even know which is more entertaining right now, watching this Afghanistan player like trying to fake an injury to the way to the semifinals of the World Cup, or watching the Panthers try to defend this lead. I really don't know. It's the best. I hope you get more into it. It's so much fun. It's the craziest. It doesn't make any sense, but then you realize, it makes actually so much sense at the same time. So I'm happy you got to see it. It's addicting though. Just be careful.
Yeah, no, I genuinely, I mean, that India-Pakistan game, I thought that was one of the coolest like sporting events that I've ever like covered, ever been to as a fan or whatever. Like that, like the atmosphere there was so cool. The game was obviously great. Like it, came down to the last over, and you really didn't know who was going to win until the end, and obviously the atmosphere was just unbelievable. That was a really, really cool thing to see live, and for it to be on Long Island, 5 minutes from the island practice facility was
so good.
Was just wild.
As we've said on our Patreon episodes, the fact that this was happening is completely bonkers. Like and like the hoops that people had to jump through to make this happen are one of a kind, like it's never going to probably happen again. And then for it to be demolished, we did our episode the next day and they were already taking the entire stadium down. So it was really funny. It's like, yep, now it's gone. And we talked about all the complaints from the pitch and everything, but no, it's very cool. And yeah, if we ever do a third cricket episode for our Patreon, we'll definitely call you on and have you come and talk about the experience.
All right,
for sure.
Yeah.
But we are not here to talk about cricket. We are here to talk about the Islanders, and the draft is at the end of this week, and then free agency starts next week. So might be an influx of new players coming into the team. It's been over a month, so if you don't remember verbatim, I don't blame you one bit. But at the sort of breakup day following the Islanders' loss to the Carolina Hurricanes in the first round, did you get a sense of maybe what kind of changes they were looking to make to the roster going forward? Generally, that doesn't mean like drafts. Right now, they do have the 20th overall pick, I believe. They made the trade with the Blackhawks and moved down a couple of spots. So maybe they could get somebody that could come in right now, but that's highly unlikely. But do you have an idea of like where they were looking to augment this offseason, whether through the draft or through free agency or trades or anything like that?
Lou wasn't, super
Nope.
specific in saying, we think that we need, whatever, a top
Right.
6 winger or whatever you want to use it there. But it was very notable to me that, in the past, he's kind of, like the meme that everybody, well, we believe in the group, right? And like we've all heard that a million times. And it wasn't like he came out and said, we need to tear this thing down and it's clear that he didn't say that, but he did say, everything's on the table and, basically he's open to some changes. And, there's always caveats with that. Like, they, relatively speaking, they don't have a ton of cap space. They don't have a ton of contracts that I look at and say, okay, they're going to be able to trade this and really get a lot from it, or even that they'll necessarily want to trade. I'm, pretty wary about predicting that they're going to totally change tack, and like do a 180 with this team. But, I do think the roster is going to look, different in a way that it hasn't looked different from year to year in a while, if that makes sense. Like, you look at 2 years ago to this last year, like really the only change was that Zach Parise retired. And that was a change that was brought on them. So I don't think that that's how it's going to be this year. I think that they're going to proactively make some kind of change or two at some point here. Whether it's, maybe it's just changing the fourth line. Maybe it's something more fundamental than that. But that alone is a shift in the way this team is kind of in the way the front office has operated.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, we talked about after the season was over that they're almost at a point where, and I mean, you could say this for the last couple of years too, they're almost at a point where they have to make a change. Like they have to do something, right? This group is, and there have been changes. Like a lot of, we're just as guilty of this as anybody else of being like, well, it's the same group. Well, it's really not. There have been some changes every once in a while, but something drastic has to happen. And, I think you're probably right. We don't really do predictions here either, although we're going to do a little bit later on. But yeah, I mean, and I guess to that point, like you talked about Lou, obviously one of the big changes now is Patrick Waugh is the coach, and he's going to apparently have some input there. Do you have any idea of like what maybe Waugh might be looking forward to? I mean, we talked about, he didn't say much at the postseason availability. For all intents and purposes, he did what he was hired to do, which was get the Islanders to the playoffs, and it wasn't perfect. There was a lot of bumps along the way. They didn't last very long in the playoffs, but he did that job. But now the job is different. Now it becomes something else. Do you see him maybe kind of pushing for certain changes to maybe bring something that he might want, a way to play that he might want to do that, would require some new players on the ice that, that can do things that the current guys can't?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that sticks out to me there is that, when Patrick first came in, he talked a lot about wanting to play with the
Right.
puck, wanting to kind of dominate possession, and kill out games when they had leads by hanging on to the
Mm.
puck, which was obviously something that they really
Yeah.
struggled with
Oh my God.
last year. And even that win streak late in the year that they went on,
Mm.
right? When they went, I think it was 8-0-1 to finish the season. Um, a lot of those games, that was not how they
Yeah.
played. They were much better defensively than they were under Lane late in those games. But they still were defending at the end of the game. They still were hanging on to one goal leads. There were still stretches where you said, wow, they won this game because of the
Mm.
goaltender. So that's kind of the first thing that sticks out in my mind of, like, I would think that Patrick is going to try to push for a team that can play in that more possession oriented way. Um, Probably, especially in the bottom
Mm.
six. One, because that's where you have like a naturally occurring chance to make changes, right? Martin and Clutterbuck, their contracts are
Mm.
expiring. And two, because I think that that's the area where I mean, they haven't played that way up and down the lineup, to be
Yeah.
fair, um, but that's kind of the spot where it's most noticeable, where, that sort of dump and chase and just get the puck out and just survive has been
Mm.
like sort of a feature of their
Yeah.
game.
I'm gonna miss it. I'm
As
gonna
a,
miss it a lot.
as yeah. So, that's the spot that I look at and think, okay, that's where, maybe you could see a real impact in the way that the team is being built, or, and who they maybe look to bring in this
Mhm.
summer.
Yeah, yeah. It's a be careful what you wish for situation, right? Yeah, I don't. You think you want to play this pretty style of hockey, but then middle of January you're playing the Sabres and it's 2-2, and you're gonna really miss Scott Mayfield just rimming one around the board for six straight icings, and I'm gonna miss that kind of stuff. Um, one thing I've been thinking about lately is that I feel like the Islanders have kind of given themselves a self-imposed deadline to make a change, which or to make a move when them and the Blackhawks completed the creepiest trade of the season, maybe in NHL history, when they traded draft picks a month and a half before the draft, so the Blackhawks could move up 2 spots in said draft. Gave the Islanders an extra second round pick in this year's draft. So the Islanders are going into this draft. Dan and I couldn't tell you a thing about any prospects outside like the top 5, and I know
Right.
none of us here are going to go deep into who they should draft at 20 when nobody knows. But the Islanders now go in with the Lightning's first round pick, the Los Angeles Kings second round pick, and the Vancouver Canucks third round pick. And the point is that by acquiring that extra second, you'd think that Lou's saying, like, we got to do something to put this extra second round pick or the first round pick, if they just want to use the two um, second rounds as like their draft for this year. I would be shocked if, and kind of more confused by the trade than I already am, which is pretty confused, if they didn't do something before Friday, because what was the point of doing that? I guess you can say, oh, we want to like restock the cupboards, but I mean, nobody does that in the middle of May. So I'm expecting, and I don't think anybody involved with the Islanders front office would look at you with a straight face and be like, "Oh no, we did that because we wanted to get the extra second round pick to make a trade, to make a pick." Like, they did it to make a trade, whether it's to open up some money or whatever. But do you kind of get that same sense here that they've kind of put a clock on themselves here, because otherwise it's kind of just a very strange move to make if you're not going to put that one of these first 2 round picks to use to um, move something around before the draft, and just go ahead and make those picks.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you first see the trade, like, that's the first place your
Right.
mind goes. I mean, that's how this team has operated in the draft for pretty much the whole time under Lou. At the trade deadline this year, Lou was actually kind of public in saying, like, yeah, we'll trade the first round pick. Like, we're totally open to that. And, if the right offer comes along and whatever. So, we haven't asked him about it since then. I don't think we did a breakup day. But I would be pretty surprised if he suddenly was like, did a 180 on that. I do think like if they made all three picks, I think that would be a smart move for
Mhm.
them. To be honest, like I do think they need to restock the cupboard. I do think that like the state of their system is something that needs addressing sooner rather than later, and like I would be completely on board with it.
Mhm.
If they made all their picks and said this is where we decided to focus in this draft, but that's not necessarily what I think they'll do if you put a gun to my
Yeah,
head.
that would be a change in pace. Although I got to be honest, like I did have that kind of idea because Patrick Waugh is coming in as a very decorated junior coach. And I thought that, working with the younger players is kind of what he's known for. And the Islanders are, let's just say, not a younger team. So regardless
Mhm.
of whether you're looking at the big club or the minor league affiliate, but yeah, it's possible. I mean, I guess that they could use all three of those picks, but I mean, I think when they didn't trade one of those second rounders as a sweetener to get rid of another trade, I think at that point we're like, okay, well, I guess they're not going to do that. But trades happen at the draft floor. Once somebody starts talking about, oh, Jim Rutherford and Lou Lamoriello are talking, they're over by the table. That means something big is in the works, I guess, something like that. But yeah, I mean, well, speaking of prospects, real quick, guys that they do have now. So we saw Ruslan Ishkahov come up for one game. Looked fine, I suppose. They have guys like William Dufour. They have Matt Maggio. They have a couple of new defensemen. They're going to have Isaiah George next year at Bridgeport. They're going to have Marshall Warren, who somehow signed with the Islanders. We don't know how this happens. I can't remember the last time a prospect signed. Well, I guess Kevin Churchman maybe was the last guy. Do you have a sense of like, and I keep asking these questions if you can read Lou Lamoriello's mind, which frankly nobody can do. So, but like, just from talking to people in and around the organization, do you have a sense that maybe some of these guys are going to get more of a role next year? Some of them still have time in Bridgeport, so that wouldn't be surprised if they just went back there. But like a guy like Ishkahov, there's rumors that he might want to go back to Russia. He did get the one game. He looks like, he's small, but he might get a shot here. Do you think that might be a direction they might go in, where then they're definitely going to need to replenish their prospect pool? But like maybe this is where those upgrades come from, is some of these guys down in Bridgeport who might finally get a shot to play for the big club.
Yeah, I mean, Ishkahov is a guy who, assuming that he is still in training camp and with the team
Right.
next year, which, like you said, those rumors
Yeah.
are out there. Otherwise, I would think that he would have a chance to make the team out of camp. I mean, like you said, he came up, made his debut last
Mhm.
year. He's been in the organization for a pretty long time. He was drafted in 2018. He's 23 years old. If he can't stick in the NHL, or at least can't, put together a convincing case to be in the
Mhm.
NHL, you would have to think that there is, from his end, you would start thinking about that as, okay, well, why am I still here when I can be making much more money,
Right.
in Russia, or I could go to, another organization in the NHL that, can give me a better chance, or whatever. Um, so, in terms of him, I think that's probably how you would have to be thinking about this training camp. Um, as far as everybody else, Maxim Siplikov is a
Mm.
guy who, they just brought in, who I think is probably going to be on the NHL roster next year. You know, I think he came over, sort of in a reverse sense of Ishikov. I don't think he would have come over if he was planning to be in
Mm.
Bridgeport. And he's 25. He's just had a really, really good year in the KHL. Doesn't have a super long track record. Last year was kind of his breakout
Right.
year, but he was, I think, generally regarded as the best sort of European prospect out there. So that's someone who, I had people from his camp saying, that they think he's going to be, a middle six guy. So, take that with a grain of salt, but certainly somebody to watch in training camp. Alex Jeffries is another one who
Yes.
I would maybe highlight, as a college signing, had a really strong year. I believe at Merrimack last year. Correct me if
Yeah,
that's
that's true.
wrong, but 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 yeah, I mean, he's probably someone just in terms of age and maybe experience who you would look at and say is, you know, probably relatively close to pro ready, or at least the closest that they have. And then Isaiah George, who
Right.
you mentioned, and who has, done who has put together a really promising couple years with London and the OHL, who had a really strong training camp last year.
That's right. He was like one of the last cuts,
You
right?
know,
He
that's
was hung around for a
yeah,
long time.
yeah,
Yeah.
and there was kind of a brief. I don't think it was ever really something that the organization discussed closely, but kind of there was a brief question of like, oh, would they consider, because he was
Right.
19, they couldn't put him in the AHL. There was a
Hmm.
brief question of would they consider putting him on the roster. So I do think that he's somebody who you'll want to watch in training camp. And then obviously Maggio and DeFore as well. I'm not sure that those guys are quite as close, but those are the other names who you should be looking at training camp, and could kind of change the conversation with a good camp.
And going into this week, which should be quite fun, with the draft and then free agency and just teams needing to get their ships in order, for those two events. I'm starting just to think about who's the player here that, or players, outside of like the obvious ones. Like we know that Clutterbuck and Martin are on, their deals have expired. Who knows about them? But outside of them and Wallstrom, who I'm imagining is going to be looking for like a change of scenery as well. Is there a name or two that is currently, under Islander team control that you think could be a surprise? Um, I guess deletion, a player that they could move on from, and move out to open up room, because like we said, like they do, as much as the Islanders system is panned universally, including by one scouting a company that had them 33rd
Yeah.
in the NHL, in their rankings, behind their own fantasy team, which was incredible stuff. There are some players, and you throw Siplikov in there, Ishkakov, George, etc., knocking on the door. So is there a player or two that you think that the Islanders that could actually move out that nobody really sees coming? For me, my pick right now actually is Simon Holmstrom. I'm just starting to get some feelings out there that maybe like he's part of a move to create space and also maybe bring something in. But is there someone that maybe you think that nobody's going to see coming that moves out?
Um, that nobody sees coming is an interesting caveat, because I guess that probably rules
Mm.
out, like, people have obviously talked about would they move Pajot, or would they move Brock Nelson. I guess those are just because they have depth at center, maybe the more obvious guys that you look at and wonder about. You know, I don't think that they would move Alexander Romanov. He's been really, really good for them, and he's obviously young, but he doesn't have a no trade clause, and he would bring back a real return.
Yep.
So, from that end, like, maybe, but like, my sort of thought, and my, I guess, educated guess, and guess is really the operative word in there with where Lou is at with his team, is I don't think that he is thinking that there needs to be major changes,
Yep.
right? And when you start getting to, names like a Romanov or, even a Brock Nelson, like those represent major changes. So my default is that's probably not where they would go, at least unless something, came up that they really couldn't say no to. Um, but it's Lou, so you never know, and you have to consider, every possibility and what could happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the thing too. It's like we don't know. Like it's such a weird. There are so many there. I mean, it's the draft, right? So like the first 10 teams are going to use their picks. It's the Sharks and it's the Blackhawks and the Ducks and teams that are like looking to kind of pull themselves up out of the pit of hell, and try and make themselves real rosters again. And then you got the guys at the bottom who are, the teams that just went deep in the playoffs. I don't even know if the Panthers have their own pick, but those kinds of teams that maybe aren't looking for immediate help. Maybe they trade those picks for something immediate or take a guy who's, project for a couple of years later. But the Islanders are very much in that middle ground where you don't know what they can do. We're sitting here talking about like what they can do with a pick that they might trade. I mean, we're going to be done with this in a little bit. They might have already traded that pick by the time this episode comes out. We have no idea. Or they could use all three of them. Like you said, it's possible. They could stick with the roster for the most part and maybe do some changes around the edges. We kind of all feel that probably wouldn't be the right thing to do, but you never know. Maybe they just decide to trade a Brock Nelson or a Anders Lee or Alex Romanov or somebody like that, and make a big change, make a big swing. So there's so many different ways this could go. I don't even really know like what to expect, and it's both exciting and terrifying because I feel like whenever that happens, the Islanders just kind of stick with what they have, but then they they never really make those big swings. But I don't know. We'll have to see. Ethan, this has been great. It's been very insightful. I mean, what do you? I guess. Well, first of all, are you going to be at the draft at the Sphere in Las Vegas this weekend? And if so, like, I don't know, what are you kind of looking forward to the most? I mean, Islanders or otherwise, do you think there's going to be a lot of activity, or do you think it's going to be just kind of chalk all the way through Friday and Saturday's 7 rounds?
Yeah, I will be there. I'm flying out tomorrow. And let's see, what am I looking forward to? I mean, it's the last in-person like centralized draft that
Oh, that's right.
kind of that will have all the all the GMs there and all the where the whole league kind of descends upon a city for 3 days. So I mean, it'll probably be the last one that like we cover in person, I guess, unless a local team has the number one pick, or unless it's at UBS or the Garden or wherever. I would think that we won't go in the future. So I guess from that end, just on a personal level, like looking forward to seeing everybody and sort of having that experience for what will probably be the last time. Is exciting. Although I'm not looking forward to the weather in Vegas. I think it'll be 108 degrees or something. And the Sphere should be very cool. Obviously, you'd rather be at a concert there, but but that should be a unique experience. And I'm not like a draft Nick by any stretch of the imagination, but I think kind of everybody knows that Celebrini will go number one. I think the Sharks have basically acknowledged that. And then nobody kind of knows who is going to go number two is the way that I have at least sort of read this. So, I think just sort of from a neutral perspective, it should be really fun to kind of see how that plays out from, picks, say 2 through 5, and how it cascades from there. I think that'll be really, really interesting. And then obviously from an Islanders end, the big question is, are they going to make this first round pick? And what do they do with it if they either make it or don't? Will there be a young prospect who everybody can get excited about right off the bat? Will there be somebody new coming into the lineup who they trade the pick for? So yeah, I think it should be really fun. It should be really interesting to see over the next few days.
A lot up in the air. You never know. Mike, do you have any final thoughts for Ethan before we cut him loose?
No, I'm going to go ahead and predict the Islanders make their first round pick and trade one of their seconds before Friday. That would be my prediction.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that there's a devil on one shoulder, angel on the other situation with their prospect pool. But look, getting a first round pick into the system for the first time since 2019 is will give it a boost. Maybe they'll move up from 33rd as we get into the middle of next year. And my other prediction for the draft, as always, is that we'll hear that this team is looking to move up, this team's looking to move down, and the first 8 to 10 teams will just remain unchanged, and nobody will do that, because that's how it goes every year.
Pretty much.
They just couldn't get it done. They were grinding real hard to a deal. They were working real hard, but it just didn't happen. Then when Lou Lamoriello is the one who makes the trade, like he did for Romanov a couple years ago, it'll get universally panned, as is tradition.
Right.
And nobody will remember it. So, but yeah, no, those are my draft predictions, and outside of the obvious, which is that it'll be an absolutely brutal broadcast from ESPN, because they have the market cornered on that one right now.
Yeah, they had a rough couple.
Yes, it's been rough. I predict that everybody in the first 32 picks will be compared to a Hall of Famer, which will no doubt skew everybody's idea of what these guys are going to be, because everybody's going to turn into either Chris Pronger or Milan Lucic, who I guess is in a Hall of Fame. There you go.
Yes, except for whoever the Islanders pick.
Right.
That one will be a reach.
Yeah. As always. Well, Ethan, have a great time at the draft. I hope the tables are kind to you in your couple of days leading up there. We really appreciate you coming on again. It's been a lot of fun. And we'll look forward. Anything to look forward to, like kind of features wise, next couple of weeks. Because again, as hot as it is outside, it's hockey's kind of buzzing right now. Do we have anything to look forward to do we have anything to look forward from you in the New York Post coming up the next couple of days?
Next couple of days, just pre-draft, pre-free agency coverage. I'll be at this Chile Argentina game tonight. That's kind of my last non-hockey thing until after July 1. And then features wise, I think hopefully we'll kind of make a plan, once we know what the roster looks like and kind of what the more interesting stories are coming out of free agency. So, hopefully, I guess that's kind of a non-answer. But,
well, actually, I'll ask you for one more on the spot prediction.
Oh,
will we know when the Islanders actually sign anyone? Because last year, obviously, they just dumped out like 6 extensions with full details.
Yeah.
The Pierre Engvall, Scott Mayfield, Varlamov extensions. The year before that was everything was quiet. Of course, the year before that was the famous Lou kept everything in his drawer until September. Which version do you think we're going to get? Do we think we're going to get the Lou that is going to divulge all the details of every contract he signs on July 1st? Do we think we're going to get somewhere in the middle like we did a couple years ago? Or do we think we're going to get the full Lou experience of, well, I'll let you know when training camp starts, who's on the New York Islanders for the 2024-2025 season?
Well, I can guarantee you that they won't be blasting out the AAV for every contract. That I can guarantee you. I do think that they will probably announce signings when they happen, or I'll say when they happen. I would have to guess that people in the league weren't thrilled when he
we loved it. It was
stash it in the drawer until September.
That really was the best.
And they did announce, like, Kyle MacLean's extension. They announced Siplakov. They announced obviously those are smaller things, I guess, but I would expect, I would be surprised if they just kept it completely quiet for until September 1st or September 15th or whatever it is.
I'm rooting for it.
But I mean, this is So it's hard to predict these
Right.
guys.
I
You
love it.
never quite know.
I
So
feel like that's a trick you can only really pull off once. It's
I
like you
know.
can only, now everybody's onto it, so you
Mhm.
can only
Yeah,
you can't go-
yeah, but we've got 2 years since.
Yeah.
It's been 2 years, so that was really just the
Yeah,
best.
that was a lot
Oh
of fun.
god.
Yeah, it's great when you're a podcaster, especially to try and
Yeah.
make something out of absolutely nothing. But there was a lot of
We think Kyle Palmieri's on the Islanders.
maybe he is. Yeah, that was a fun
Maybe
couple
he's
of months.
not.
But
Yeah.
Ethan, we really appreciate you coming on again. We'll get you on again. We're coming on, and we'll get you on again at some point, maybe next season. And again, enjoy the draft, enjoy the game tonight, and we will talk to you again very soon.
absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, guys. I really appreciate
No
it.
problem. Take care.
You got it, man. Enjoy the cricket.
Yes.
All right. You
Okay.
too.
Well, that was a lot of fun. Thank you again to Ethan Sears for coming on. That was awesome. I feel for Islanders beat writers because it's hard to get into the mind of one Lou Lamoriello and kind of just kind of even predict what you think he's going to do. But man, this year especially, there's just so much involved. I think we all kind of want the Islanders to make a big change, but expecting them to and seeing them doing it are kind of two different things. So I don't know.
And it's weird because like a big change to us is like
Right.
on the outside, moving on from JG Pajot. What like oh, that's nothing major, I think, but to us, of course, it would shake us to the foundation.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing is like how what is a big change to us is very different from how it would be looked at
Right.
from the outside in. But that's my prediction is it's going to be one of those moves where it's like to me and you, we're going to be thinking about it all night and being like, God, what if can Pajot played so many different roles or Anders Lee was their captain, all this stuff like. But to people on the outside be like, yeah, like, well, of course they would try to move on from that contract. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, so
yeah. Let's do a couple more predictions. Although, having said that, let's see if we can have some fun and maybe throw some darts against the wall and see what happens here. So you've already given a couple. Do you have anything else as far as like UFAs or draft picks or anything like that?
So I have a couple. I have some. I'll do like kind of more specific player situations for this one, and then I have more abstract situations that we can do towards the end here of this long episode. But I think that the Islanders will move on. JG Pajot will not be a New York Islander next year, which will be sad, but I think necessary. But I don't. The back end of this prediction is that I don't think it will be. The Islanders will have to give up much, or if anything, it could be a situation where they just trade him for, someone's 7th round pick in like 2027, something.
So just a straight dump, basically, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Almost like a future considerations type of trade. Because I do think that Pajot has more value around the league than people realize because of his position. He's only signed for 2 years at $5 million, and he's a third line center. I think that's fine, especially someone who can do what he can do and has the respect that he garners.
Yeah.
So I think that that is my prediction there. And as I said, I do think that I just have a feeling Simon Holmstrom's name is going to come up. Whether they trade him or not, who knows? I like the guy a lot, but that's one of my predictions as well.
Yeah, I mean, you're not the first person to have kind of put that seed out there. And I think that's got to do with the fact that Holmstrom has made himself into, much like Kyle MacLean, made himself into a pretty useful player. I mean, he led the league in shorthanded goals last year, at least for most of it. I don't know if he finished there, but I think he's shown that he can play, and people are going to want that. He's young, he's cost controlled. I could see them wanting that, but what are the Islanders going to get back for? Like, dumping a Pajot who's still got 2 years left, $5 million per on his deal is one thing, but like dumping Simon Holmstrom doesn't make a lot of sense. But I mean, it's possible. We'll have to see. Again, it's entirely possible that the Islanders just use those picks. Like, I don't think that that's as crazy as it might seem, or it seemed when they made that trade with the Blackhawks. I mean, maybe they just use them. But this is an older team. They do need immediate help. Those dudes aren't going to see the NHL, the light of the day. Light of the day in less than 4 years, if at all. So it's possible. It's most likely that they trade them and get immediate help, but you never know. But I'm looking at the UFA list right here, and frankly, it ain't that much. Like, there's not a lot out there. Some good players. Don't get me wrong. Sam Reinhart is not going to sign with the Islanders after scoring 57 goals for the Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers, but he's a UFA, for example. He's probably the best of the bunch right here. But like, Jake Gensel obviously gets talked about a lot. I highly doubt that they're going to sign him. And if they did, he's 29, which means that he might as well be 58 in terms of, hockey analysis and stuff like that. So I can't really see that happening. Tero Teravainen is also UFA. That'd be interesting. Tyler Bertuzzi and Anthony Mantha, both, former Red Wings, are right there. Is this the year the Islanders finally acquired Jason Zucker, who has always kind of felt a bit like an Islander, right? Without being an Islander. That would be something. Brady Shea is out there. Our friend Arthur Staple throwing his name around. Maybe he might make a lot of sense for the Islanders. Still very good on the offensive end of things. Although I don't know, the Islanders defense to me feels like it's at one half cast in stone, and then the other half needs a lot of changes. So I don't know if Brady Shea's the guy.
Yeah.
And then Jonathan Marchessault, who to me is the most interesting one, but he's going to resign in Vegas. Like this whole thing is nonsense. He's just going to resign. Anybody on this list jump out to you? And by the way, I just want to get this out there right now. I love Anthony Beauvillier. You love Anthony Beauvillier. Everybody loves the guy. We loved him for many years here. There's no way that this guy should come back to the Islanders. And it's not because I hate him. People are like, well, what if they bring him back at the minimum? He just plays in the fourth line. This guy's not going to play the fourth line. He's never been played. If he was able to play in the fourth line, they never would have traded him. Like, the problem is he's either in the top six or he's not anywhere. And then he goes, MIA for 25 games every season. So love Bo, wish him nothing but the best. Please don't re-sign Anthony Beauvillier. Thank you very much. That's my spiel. I don't want to hear anymore.
Yep.
But yeah, anybody on this list jump out to you?
So one funny thing about Beauvillier, and this is a tough thing to say just because Clutterbuck played 22 more games. So on a point per game basis, Beauvillier beat him. But Beauvillier had 5 goals, 12 assists last year in 60 games, and Clutterbuck had 7 goals, 12 assists, so 19 points. And like I said, I know Clutterbuck played more games, but it's just hilarious that in itself, that Clutterbuck played 22 more games than Beauvillier kind of tells you. But I'll be hypocritical and also say that if Beauvillier signed that 1-year veteran extension, I would just crack up and love it because it would just be hilarious to have him back. I like this. So I was getting at this earlier, which is that the Islanders and Lou Lamoriello has this extension, this reputation of being like the guy who makes the big July 1st mistakes and signs the crippling contracts. When if you look back at the Islanders on July 1st, despite what they tell us when on NHL Network and all the insiders who say that Johnny Gaudreau is coming to the Islanders and then Nazem Kadri is coming to the Islanders and Jason Zucker's coming to the Islanders and all that, the Islanders have rarely signed anybody without any connections to the team over the past. Like even I don't even want to include Chara and Parisi because I think that they kind of do have connections to the team. Like if like the ones from out of left field, Varlamov, Brassard, like there's been no big ticket free agents since
Andrew Ladd.
Andrew Ladd, right? Like, I mean, you could say Varley if you want. I think that's fair, but outside of him and Ladd, they really haven't done anything. So I always get excited on July 1st, but then have to tell myself to pump the brakes. I have a couple things to say though, guys. I'm very scared of signing.
A lot of those.
Yeah, because there are definitely a lot. Teravainen, I think, comes to play. I'm just like a little. I don't know. I know he's a good player and all that, but he always flatters to impress, to deceive me. Like I just never feel like I'm all that impressed. I also just don't want to sign any of these Hurricanes. Like I don't want Jordan Martinook or Stefan Nason either. Like I just don't want them. They bug me, and it would take some getting over to get there. Mike Riley. Yeah, we didn't talk about Mike Riley, and I mean, who knows what the situation is with him? I think it's smart on like a personal level for him to go to the market to see what he can get because he had such an effective year for the Islanders, but at the same time, I feel like he might regret that because he's got a home here. So that's an interesting situation. Plus, like the Islanders do need Mike Riley. Like they just need that kind of defenseman in this core. I think that if you think Romanov, Dobson, Pelech, and Polak as your top 4, and then someone to play with Mayfield who can move a puck, Riley would fit that that kind of profile. The other, so I have, but my predictions on what's going to happen is the Islanders will, not on July 1st, but during free agency or maybe a PTO. Tyler Johnson, he of the former of the Tampa Bay Lightning and now of the Chicago Blackhawks. I think that he just screams like the Derek Brassard type 1 year, $1 million. Bring him in at camp. He's on a PTO. Obviously going to make the team kind of trade or signing for the Islanders. So, and I mean, whatever. He had 31 points in 67 games. I don't think he's very good anymore.
How about that? Like, I didn't even know.
Yeah.
Crazy.
He actually played all right for the Blackhawks last year. He just feels like the kind of guy they bring in.
Right. I feel like
the
his
one
career
guy who
died like 5 years ago. Like, it's just,
right? Yeah. The Blackhawks the Lightning had to like get rid of him.
He was a huge part of their 2015 Stanley Cup run that they lost to the Blackhawks. And then after that, it seemed like he just kind of disappeared into the ether, but turned out he just disappeared into Chicago.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I also like the guy, the player who I actually want the most, I think, is Jake DeBrusk. I was like, if they're going to sign a free agent, he'd be the one who I'd feel most comfortable with. Fit well. Like, he probably fills a need playing in the top 6 on the wing, and good player and whatever. He's played in a good defensive system for a while. And like the ones that I don't want, like I said, Teravainen, definitely like congratulations to Vladimir Tarasenko, and thank you for that huge goal you scored against the Rangers. I'm afraid of signing you. I feel like we're just going to hear Anthony Duclair's name over and over and over again. I don't know if he really excites me as like the kind of solution in the top 6. I think he's much more. He's better to be like your 7th. Like, he's better to be what Kyle Palmieri would be on a good team, right? Like your 7th or 8th forward. So I don't know if I want to go into to Anthony Duclair land, but DeBrusk I would be totally on board with. And the thing I really want the most, Dan, and this I'll turn it over to you after saying this, is I want the Islanders to trade for a player, and the name that keeps popping out to me is Drake Batherson, just because of his contract and his ability. Like, he's a good player, not necessarily saying specifically Drake Batherson, but that kind of player he's under team control, he's young, he scores, all that kind of stuff. I want the Islanders to make a trade for a player like that, one that would be objectively a really good trade, like a really good acquisition for a team like the Islanders to make, because he fills a need, makes him a little younger, everything that people say about that the Islanders need. They make a trade for that. They don't pay too much for it, but the obvious thing here is, of course you want your team to make a trade for that, but the reason I want them to make that trade is because I want to see the hoops that people have to jump through to pan that trade. Like they did to the Bo Horvat trade, because that's what I want. Like let's, who's another one would be like Travis Konechny, let's say. Like they trade for that kind of player, a guy who's clearly fits the team's need. He's still young, he's got plenty of upside, all that. And just to watch all those chart slingers out there have to say, well, I don't really know if this one's going to work out. It's not what the Islanders need right now. Like, who are they fooling trying to win a Stanley Cup with this roster? So that's the thing I really want the most, is for the Islanders to make a move like that. One that would be, if it was the Rangers or whoever, would be universally, parades in the street. But for the Islanders to watch them jump through those hoops to pan it.
The trade that immediately came to my mind when you talked about that was the Brandon Hagel trade for the Lightning, which was like, he's a good player, but I don't know. I don't know why they would make this trade. Why trade for him now? And then they gave him like a ton of dough. It's like, really? You want to give this guy all that much money? He's not really a proven player. And all he did was help them win, a Stanley Cup or 2 or whatever. So like that's the kind of thing I would do. I don't know. Like, it's just so funny. I don't know, man. I'm getting old, and I'm looking at this list of UFAs, and I just don't know. I don't know what this team wants to be. Like, I just don't know what the Islanders want to be. And we talked about this when, they acquired Bo Horvat and even throughout this season, which was terrific for Bo. Like, Bo's a new player. He fit right into what they were trying to do. They needed a first line center. They got one. They paired him up with Barzal, and the two of them are really, really good together. That left wing spot is kind of on the open. It's been Lee. It's been Cizikas. It's been whoever. There's a lot of possibilities there. Maybe the answer is like, well, they need a big left wing to play up there, but then who would that be? And like, who would you give up to get there? And then, what does that leave on the, assuming you keep Nelson, whose contract is up at the end of the year, and Palmieri, who I think is also up at the right. I think the two of them are up at the end of this year, or maybe, next year, whatever it is. Then, they're just going to be older, and then you got to have to find time to get, another player on that end. And then what happens with the fourth line? What happens to that third line? Like, we've seen, how many times have we seen the third line for this team be a complete black hole? And like the two times it wasn't a complete black hole, they went to the semifinals both. So I just don't, I want the Islanders to pick an identity and stick with it. And I think the kind of like the Trotzian era of, although the Panthers just won a Stanley Cup literally last night playing this way, that grindy, just physical, punishing style, I don't think is going to work for them anymore unless they add somebody to score goals. And so like the Panthers can play that way because they have Sam Reinhart, they have Sasha Barkov, they have Matthew Tkachuk, guys that can score goals. Carter Verhaeghe, who can score. Evan Rodriguez was fantastic. This guys that can produce offense in addition to hitting and grinding and forechecking and all that stuff that comes with the old hockey man sort of mentality. I don't know what this team wants to be. They can't keep giving up leads. They can't keep having a shitty penalty kill. They can't keep having a sub-average power play. They can't keep having guys that while we like and respect and love and want happiness for, just keep trotting them out there and hope that it works for the best. And hope that the goalie makes a bunch of saves. They can't just keep leaving it to the goalies because they burnt one of them out and the other guy, is almost 40 years old. So I don't know. I wish I had a better answer. I wish I had a sexy hot take for all this stuff. Please don't draft that guy. What's his name? Trevor Connolly. Please don't draft him. He's too many red flags. Don't like him. Please don't sign. I don't know. Tyler Johnson doesn't excite me, but I can see that happening. Please don't sign David Perron. Sorry, that was the guy I was going to. Do not.
I don't want Tyler Johnson. It feels like the type of thing that we see on Twitter.
Yeah.
On like August 8th.
Bertuzzi doesn't do much for me. I know he's got talent. He scored 25 goals last year. I don't know. Seems like a bit of a goofball. I don't like him. Plus he'd have to cut his hair, so forget it. I don't know. Mantha seemed like a good player at one time. Doesn't really seem much anymore. I don't know. Guys like Gensel, Reinhart,
Stamkos.
Yeah.
Stamkos would just be funny. Yeah. Like that's the type of thing that would just crack me. Like it would. Honestly, he actually makes more sense for the Islanders than he probably does for like 28 other teams.
You can just slot him up on that left wing spot and just let him roll.
Yeah, like he like actually does give the Islanders something that they would need. But at the same time, we know how those deals usually go, and it would be more a fun thing to happen than one that I think would work out, blindingly well for the Islanders. But
as long as he doesn't sign with the Leafs, like just don't sign with the Leafs. Just stay with the Lightning. Retire there. Please do your thing. Sorry, there was one other guy I didn't want to sign. Oh, Mike Hoffman. Please don't sign Mike Hoffman.
Oh, yeah.
No.
I don't.
But
another former future Islander.
Exactly.
Definitely has worked out.
Yeah. Kevin LeBanc. I don't want to. I get he's from Staten Island. From what I understand, he grew up a Rangers fan, so the hell with him. Same with Trevor Zegras. Don't trade for this guy. He grew up a Rangers fan. I don't want him here. I can't stand. I don't like the idea of bringing him in here. I don't think he's a Lou guy anyway. Just this whole list is just one red flag after the other. I just don't, Jack Roslovic, I thought he was going to be cool because he was, an Ohio guy playing for the Blue Jackets, and it just fell apart for him. So, Lindholm, I don't know what he wants anymore. He wants a lot of money, but then he disappears for a long time. Maybe this is the year with the Islanders sign Adam Henrique, which another guy I can see coming down on PTO. So I just wasted everybody's time. There's a whole lot of nothing there. And that's it. But I don't know what's going to come of this. The more I've thought now that the Stanley Cup final is over and, we're getting closer to the draft, I just don't know what's going to happen, but I guess that's good because we'll have a lot to talk about next week on our final season finale of the season. Like I said, we'll be back next Tuesday after free agency, so we can talk about what the Islanders did or didn't do. We can always come back if they sign somebody, hire somebody, fire somebody, whatever. But assuming they don't, assuming all the business is settled as it has been the last couple of years, next Tuesday's episode, which will come out on Wednesday, will be our season finale, and then we'll be back in October. But again, the Patreon is always hopping. So sign up, patreon.com/Islanders Anxiety. You get your mailbags, you get bonus podcasts, you get our Country Club Atmosphere. You get all kinds of stuff we might just throw out there just for fun. So do that anytime and have a fun summer with us. What else? Follow us on Twitter at Isles Anxiety Pod. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible.com, iHeartRadio, YouTube Music, and wherever you get your podcasts. Our theme song is Morning Haze by Family Dinner. Listen to more of their music at Bandcamp and Spotify. Read Lighthouse Hockey every single day for your most up-to-date Islanders news and discussion. Great year again by Dom and Steve and Jenny and everybody who writes over there. We are part of the Fans First Sports Network. Learn more at fansfirstsports.com. Shop vintageIceHockey.com. Try wines from the Pinot Project. Mike, where can everybody find you on Twitter?
The Big Lebowski with 2 E's.
Follow Mike at the Big Lebowski. Read his work at Action Network and listen to his work at Action Network and read his work in the New York Post. And thank you again to Ethan Sears of the New York Post for joining us today. It was very great. Any final thoughts on these last couple of days before the draft? I mean, we're approaching the 2-hour mark here, so we've had a lot of thoughts. Yeah. Anything final before we head into draft land?
No, yeah, just remember to prepare yourself during these few days that you're going to hear very, very little good that the island, whatever the Islanders do, you're not going to hear anything good about it. We the last time they picked in the first round was Simon Holmstrom, and that was a pick that people thought, hey, don't ever let the Islanders draft a first round pick again because it was such a reach. Turns out he's a pretty decent player. So just don't overreact to anything you see, whether it's a draft or free agency or trades. It's just that's the main takeaway here. And it's I'm feeling that the next time we speak in our season finale, we'll be talking about the end to a couple Islander careers for some beloved guys, and I'm dreading it a little bit, but yeah, it's it'll be interesting to see where we're at when we reconvene in a week.
Yeah, definitely. We have absolutely no idea what's going to come of it.
Or maybe we're talking about 1-year extensions for Cal Clutterbuck and Matt Martin, and we're convincing ourselves, you know what? They were they were okay last year. Let's go. One more year.
Let's bring it on back.
One more chance.
Run it back.
One more chance.
Let's see what happens. I mean, that is 100%. I couldn't put a number on it, but there's definitely a possibility. I'm not,
I would say 50-50.
Yeah, possibly. So,
I think even more for Clutterbuck. I think Clutterbuck is more likely than not to come back, and Martin is like less likely to come back. So if you meet them in the middle, I guess
so. Clutterbuck is definitely a guy who they would sign and then not tell us until September. And it's like, well, how come nobody signed Cal Clutterbuck? Well, it's because he's still playing for the Islanders. So there you go. But yeah, we'll have to see what happens. Again, July 1st is Monday, so going to be a lot of movement. Find that stream of TSN over Sportsnet and strap in for the ride, and we'll see what happens. So we'll reconvene on Tuesday. We'll see how the dust is settled. Again, the Islanders also have had a history of signing guys after that time. So maybe we'll see what happens on July 2nd as well. But we'll figure it out then, and then sign off for the summer. All right. Thanks a lot for listening to this supersized episode. We hope we've given you a lot to think about before the draft, and we'll be back in a week. All right. Thanks a lot. Oh, sorry. Forgot one last thing. We put out our live album of Weird Islanders, the podcast, last Friday, live from Offside NYC. It contained a lot of great stories. I know that the sound quality is a little bit rough. This was our first time doing this, but fortunately, everybody's story came through. So if you just make it past our yapping and get to the parts where people tell their stories, you will not be disappointed, I promise. And if you want a bonus story, that is all for the Patreon. Mike's friend Kenny, who was also wearing the greatest shirt we've ever seen, told a very funny story about getting into an Islanders game, a very important Islanders game, when he didn't have a ticket, which apparently is Kenny's modus operandi. So he is known for doing that, and I highly recommend listening to that quick story. And then this week on Thursday, I didn't want to put it out on Friday, so I moved it up a day, is our next Dan's Islanders book club, about a book not specifically about the Islanders, but about hockey. The Islanders are part of it, and if you've ever wanted to know what goes on in the mind of a referee or a linesman, I found the book for you. Trust me, you're going to want to read it. And that is, again, also exclusively at the Patreon. So check those out, and we'll talk to you in a week. All right. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.